it creates such an opportunity for strong relationships. And I think in a lot of different cultures, maybe not American culture, but in a lot of different cultures, this is essential and it's a huge part of everyday life. So it is very important to invite people into our homes, to get to know them, to show them who we really are, and to represent Jesus well.
You are listening to Our Urban Voices with Dr. Alphonse Javed, a podcast that presents Christian narratives through diverse voices that impact urban ministry. Here is your host.
Hello and welcome back to Our Urban Voices. I'm your host, Dr. Alphonse Javed. Today I'm joined by Rebecca Castillo. So this is the second time you are speaking for us. You spoke at the Heart for Muslims conference back in November. So thank you. Thank you so much for joining us again. On our topic today focuses on hospitality in outreach to Muslims. So let's start there. Thank you again for joining us, Rebecca. So before we get started, please tell us very briefly about your family. I believe families is important. It humanizes us and it makes a connection with the audience. So start there, please share a little bit about your family.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. So I am married. We don't have any children yet. We're praying for the Lord to provide some soon, but we've been married for about 6.5 years. This June will be 7. Wow, time flies. But we are both from Latin America and come from sizable families. I am one of 3 children. However, we grew up in a context that was we were close with our extended family. And in Latin American cultures, at least in parts of it, your cousins are like extension of your brothers and sisters. So I have around 40 cousins, and we lived in 2 different cities, usually growing up. However, we were very close. So I definitely come from a very large family, and I come from a large family, and so does my husband. So that's a little bit about where we come from.
Wow, that's amazing. Actually, I have same cultural, understanding. Your cousins are your brothers and sisters, and even your neighbors are your cousins.
Correct.
So that's the same understanding in Pakistan too, where I come from.
That's great. That's great.
And now I have 4 children, so that's beautiful. And the audience actually knows that because in every episode I talk about them. Let's start with a few simple questions. Number one is, and I understand why hosting others matter, or caring for others, because we are coming from those cultures. But in American culture, it is still a foreign idea. So let's start there. Why does hosting matter? What does hospitality and entertaining mean so much?
Absolutely. Well, I'm going to start from a little bit of a biblical reason why, to me, I think it's so important. Hospitality is so important. And honestly, I'm going to go right to the beginning in Genesis. So what is God doing? We oftentimes, when we look at the creation story, we read it from the perspective of God as creator, and we're in awe of his power. But when we look at it from a relational perspective, what is God doing? God is creating a space for then humans who he create, for us to dwell in. And it's not a simple place. It's a pretty complex. It took 6 days to create it all. But I think it's really a neat opportunity, a neat thing to look at when we're looking at the creation narrative of God creating a space for us. So God is setting that as the first example. And I think he created us. He hosted us in the world we live in. And so God is our first example of hospitality. And so he created us in his image. So if God is hospitable, then I think by nature, in humans, we have this need, that God gave us for communing with one another, for hospitality, for creating space to be with one another. And so on a little bit more of a practical level, hospitality, the home, I don't usually just refer to hospitality as in the home setting. really, I think of hospitality as creating and having a space to be present with others. And so sometimes that is in the home, and the home is the perfect setting for it, but sometimes it's in a coffee shop, sometimes is at a park. It can be in a lot of different places, but it really is a place where we can be present with someone else and have the opportunity to know each other, to build relationship in a deep and personal way. And in order to relate with our neighbor, with anyone, that is super important. But on the hospitality in the more traditional sense and entertaining, sharing your home is sharing your life. It's kind of, if we look at it, it's a vulnerable place. You're inviting people to look at your home, to look at everything about how you live. But it creates such an opportunity for strong relationships. And I think in a lot of different cultures, maybe not American culture, but in a lot of different cultures, this is essential and it's a huge part of everyday life. So it is very important to invite people into our homes, to get to know them, to show them who we really are, and to represent Jesus well.
Amen. Amen. There is a big emphasis on hospitality in Latin culture. So, what was it like for you adjusting to living in America and realizing that Americans often don't put the same importance on hospitality?
Well, I think it was, that's a great question. In Latin America, again, hospitality is very fluid. In a sense, it's very organic and, it's part of life. So you get invited to people's houses, you go to their houses, but at the same time, it's very natural and everyday. It is expected that you have an open invitation to your neighbors, your families, your friends' house, and they have an open invitation to yours. So I think the biggest transition for me was understanding that there are more limits. Here is not that hospitality is not necessarily important, but I think space is important. And so you don't just barge into someone's house unexpected. You plan the times to get together a lot more. So that was really hard. I remember showing up at people's houses and really catching people by surprise. And I mean, I laugh about it now, but it was a little awkward at the time. But it was a huge transition because not having that option to just drop in on someone, I think it made me feel perhaps like not like I was 100% welcome. And it's all about perspective. That wasn't necessarily what they were trying to show. But because of the cultural differences, it was easy to feel lonely, knowing that I couldn't just drop in somebody's house. So yeah, I think that was one of the biggest differences. And then having that understanding and realizing that hospitality is important, it just has different rules, was really helpful.
Yeah, I like the idea that it has different rules, and that's so true. And it for me, it's the same thing as your culture, but in America, my wife has American culture, so she's American, and I'm immigrant. So we always have to manage that. I have to give room to her and her cultural understanding of everything, and then she has to give room to allow me to exercise my cultural understandings, and we both, I think, we're managing really well. But the idea, there's a different rule in each culture, what it means to be host. When we're trying to host somebody, there's a different rule. Based on your experience, how do you think the typical American attitude toward hospitality could impact how immigrant communities perceive the gospel?
Well, as I shared before, I think in general and in many conversations with immigrant communities, oftentimes it takes a long time before they feel welcome. Again, because the rules are different, because what their expectations of hospitality looks like is different. I have a friend, a Middle Eastern friend, who said that when they moved to the US, they brought a lot of gifts, a lot of little gifts, because the expectation is when you get invited into someone's home, you bring a little gift. So they brought a lot of different things. And it took them about a year before they were even invited to an American's home. And so it took that long for them to even give out the first gift. And that was really hard for them. It brought a lot of feelings of loneliness and whatnot. And so at the same time, how does it impact their ability to perceive the gospel? I mean, in a lot of the foreign cultures, you are not really able to get into deeper conversations about the gospel or about who you are and how God impacts your life until you've built a strong relationship. So, and a lot of that happens in hospitality. A lot of time that happens in time spent with one another. So I think the attitude is, if we're not hospitable, then oftentimes we're not able to really get to that point of having an opportunity to share. So if all we're doing is meeting a person and sharing right away without that time to build a relationship, and to, see them as humans, image bearers of God, sometimes it might be easier for them to reject the message if it doesn't come with that relationship building.
Wow. You come from a Venezuelan background, correct?
That's correct.
I'd like to hear from you about any similarities and differences between Hispanic hospitality versus other traditional cultures. You just mentioned Middle Eastern, right? So like Middle Eastern, African, or Asian cultures where many Muslims come from. What's been your experience?
Well, I will tell you an anecdote about the first time I went to the Middle East. And of course, I did not know the language. I went for some language learning, and we hadn't been there very long. We were actually staying with a local family who didn't speak English for language learning. And that weekend, on Saturday or Sunday, they said, okay, today is the weekend, so it's time to go to visit family. And so we got ready and we headed over to visit their family. Of course, as learners, we were following the leads. Like in Latin America, we're very hospitable and warm cultures. We're very touchy-feely. That I understood that wasn't going to be the case in Middle Eastern context. So we were following and, letting them go before us and kind of repeating what they were doing as far as how they were interacting with one another. So there were a few different things. There was specific ways of how you greeted the elders, or there was, differences in how women greet each other versus women versus men and whatnot. But once we got over the pleasantries and we moved in, when we got into the living room space, it was a small apartment and there must have been about 30 people there. And everybody was eating. They drink a lot of tea. In Venezuela, we don't. We're more coffee drinkers. But there was something warm being served. There was snacks being served. There was lots of food and lots of pushiness about making sure you're eating all the food. And so here we are snacking, and then no, lunchtime. And so here we're all eating together. But what caught my attention was the levels of how loud the room was, how everybody was talking with one another and interrupting one another in their conversation. And we didn't understand. This was barely our first weekend there. So we didn't understand much at all. We were relying on Google Translate a little bit and, trying to navigate what was being said. However, the way it felt like I was at my grandmother's house back in Venezuela. And so just with the way that the uncles were interacting, the ways that the children were interacting, the women and everybody in a very warm way, interacting with one another and attempting to interact with us despite the language barrier. I felt right at home, and I felt like, yes, some of the like I said, the pleasantries, the ways that you approach one another might be slightly different. However, the same warmness, the same relationship was there. And that was very comforting to me. And that was the first time I realized, wow, the Lord has done something awesome by calling me and giving me a heart to work among these people, because I truly felt right at home. Despite the language barriers. And then once I've understood more and once I've acquired more language, I started to realize even the conversations are similar, from family conversations to politics and religion, and there's a lot of overlap, and I have found that to be such a blessing.
Yeah, I totally understand. Um, I totally understand how that will play such a significant role in sharing the gospel, because now you are immersing yourself into their culture, and having that understanding does help. But it may seem a little bit redundant, because you did explain some of the things that I want you to sort of like tell me again. The question is, you were a presenter at the last Heart for Muslims conference, and rather than just talking about hospitality for your presentation, you did something unusual, and you sort of like explained to me in your this previous comment. You brought snacks and beverages for each participant. Why did you think that was important?
Well, I think number one, I think, if we're going to talk about hospitality, we have to show hospitality.
Right.
Also, I think, the way that if we look at Jesus's life, the way that he taught the disciples, the ones that were with him all the time, was always by modeling, was, taking advantage of every normal everyday opportunity that they had, whether they were in the synagogue, he was pointing something out, whether they were walking and there were needs, and Jesus was addressing them. He wasn't just giving them telling them, you need to do this. He was showing them how to do that. And so when I was thinking about hospitality, or when I think about what we do as followers of Jesus and as ministers of the gospel, we are to follow Jesus' example of leading by example. So that was one of the motivations for it. And second, I wanted the people in the conference to feel welcome, to feel that even though it was a short conference, that they could feel comfortable and they could participate and ask questions. And I have found it over the years, since I was a child, that when there's food and snacks and something to drink, there's something about that really makes people more comfortable. And so, and it definitely did that. I thought it was a great time where people felt comfortable and were able to ask a lot of questions. And I grew up in my father is a pastor, and so I grew up in as a daughter of a pastor. And my parents were very hospitable, and their example has impacted my life and my ministry even now. And that was one of the big things that they always did: make sure to provide food to those who they had around, to meet needs, but also to just provide that space where people feel comfortable. So I wanted to make sure that those who came and participated felt that way.
Yeah, that was awesome. And I think sometimes that's what we need to do. We need to show rather than just tell. And that was a brilliant way to show that and to set the example too. Let's talk about the flip side of hosting, being a guest. How can American Christian be good guests when they may be in a home with a very different culture than their own?
Okay, I love this question. They number one thing is to be an observant, be willing to just to be flexible and to realize that it's going to be different, that it has different rules, like we talked before. I think oftentimes the expectation is, we are, as foreigners, we're being hosted in the American culture, and a lot of times the expectation is we're the ones that come, so we need to understand the American culture, and that's legitimate, 100%. However, American Christians who want to host and be a guest, I think it's always important to learn a little bit about the culture that they're going to be a guest to, but also to just go with open eyes, wide open, absolutely, to watch what they're doing and what's happening. And I talked a little bit about this whenever I was at the conference, and I think it's important to share again. I think it's really fascinating that in the Bible, when we hear about hospitality, it just says briefly, be hospitable. don't neglect showing hospitality, and that's the language that is used. However, if we really look into more details, what's happening in Luke 10, when Jesus is sending out the disciples 2 by 2s to minister to people, he's kind of giving them a pretty detailed list of instructions of how to be a guest, right? And how to, yeah, like he's saying, go find a person of peace, sit with them, stay there, don't go house to house. There's a lot of very specific instructions that is being given. And so it really caught my attention as to why Jesus would give instruction as to how to receive and accept hospitality. And one of the things that it says, be intentional. You have a purpose that you're going. Eat and drink what's provided. It's invest the time and do God's work to proclaim the kingdom. And I think oftentimes we're thinking, I want to be the one that's hospitable. I want to be the one that's serving. But there's so much honor that we're able to give to people whenever they are being the ones that are pouring their hospitality. And this is very important to people from Middle Eastern cultures, African cultures, Latin American cultures, to be given the opportunity to host and for that hospitality to be well received. So it is important during that time, again, to observe, to be willing to try different things, to put yourself in a place that might be uncomfortable, out of your comfort zone, but definitely to have to ask the Lord to give us open eyes and open hearts to the different ways of living. And as I think, in my experience, the best opportunities to share the gospel, to represent Jesus well, to proclaim his word, has been while being hosted, more than even when I host, because when I host, I'm worried, I'm paying attention to the food and is everybody okay, and all these things are important and are great, but it takes a little bit away from the time of being with the people sometimes. But when I'm a guest, I'm letting them honor me, or letting me showing honor in that way, and having the opportunity to sit and listen to their story and share about what the Lord has done in my life and share about Jesus.
That's really cool. So let me ask you about Ramadan. We are about to enter into Ramadan. If you personally have been a guest at a Ramadan dinner, do you have any advice for our listeners who may be invited to one this spring?
Absolutely. Actually, Ramadan is probably my most social month of the year here. So I have been invited to multiple, and I make it a point to attend as many as I have an opportunity to. So I think Ramadan presents an awesome opportunity to share the gospel. Those who are truly seeking to please God or whatnot, they have been fasting all day. They're doing so many different things in order to please God, to try to gain God's favor. And they're very curious about what you believe. If they're inviting you in their house, they're already spiritually ready, a little bit more than any other time of the year, because they're wanting to talk about and hear about spiritual things. So I would say make sure to say yes and boldly go. And every Ramadan dinner that I have attended has led to long gospel conversations. And it's been a great opportunity because oftentimes I haven't even initiated. They say, I said, the very different dinner. I mean, they're fasting all day. They start out eating a date and some water as they break their fast. They actually, it's the only time I've been out to eat where I hear a little bit more of a vocal prayer. I mean, even if it's just a little bit, a short one. So I've had many opportunities to ask, oh, are you praying? Do you mind if I pray for you as we share this meal? And it's provided a lot of natural opportunities to share the gospel. I would say go respectful, and it's also a great opportunity to learn about what Ramadan is, what it means to them, and to bridge that to gospel conversations.
If you frequently invite Muslims into your home, are there any dietary restrictions or other accommodations you observe in your home to make them feel more comfortable?
Absolutely, yes. So my husband and I decided that since we are inviting Muslims to our home, we've decided that we do not cook pork in our home. We're actually, ever since we moved into this house, and yeah, and even we've gone a little bit, I've gone as the one who cooks a little extra step for some, and this was by getting some experience from some that are more religious and follow the instructions even more. I even have one specific pot that or skillet that I use to cook halal meals for those who are more restrictive even. But yes, so specifically no pork, no alcohol, nothing that would make in their eyes this table unclean for them to eat. We've removed it from our house, and not everyone has those expectations, and also not everyone adheres to all the rules the same way. But we've decided to kind of go a little bit extreme so that anyone can feel welcome and feel free to eat in our home.
Man, that's intentionality. And I think when you tell, in my experience, anytime I'm hosting a Muslim person and I tell them it's all halal, they do appreciate. They may not
Oh,
ask, but they are uncomfortable and they don't want to ask. But when you do tell them, it makes huge difference. And then added bonus will be like, and we have separate parts and pan to cook this. That's even more. I never thought going that far, but that's brilliant.
well, and a little word of advice here. The very first time, and this has been kind of my general experience, the first time that I've had people come to my house, they're very apprehensive to eat. So the first time they come, I try to make a fish meal. That way I don't have to even go as far as saying it's halal. So I'll just make something with fish and just very simple. And then usually that helps. But then I say, I understand that in your religion there is restrictions. And so I just want you to know that this is what I've done in order to meet that. And so what I'm trying to say here is that it helped me kind of realize the first time they might not eat as much, but as I open and share about my intentionality, now they come and they eat whatever I present, because they have that trust that I will not present something that's unclean to them.
Yeah. Would you give us some tips? What are some common mistakes to avoid when hosting for Muslims?
Absolutely. So yes, I have a few tips written down, so I'm looking at them right now. But yes, absolutely. So a lot of times in their homes, just one very practical, simple, they don't wear shoes inside the house. And I know that that may be strange for some people from the US, some not so much, but it's it's a big deal. So don't be prepared to kind of take shoes off at the house. Also, as far as going back to being um, observant, I think it's following people's leads when it comes to greeting, how they greet, be respectful. And for men, sometimes it's not uncommon for men to greet you with a kiss among themselves. And that's something is different. So again, just having an open mentality and open heart to just notice what are some of the differences. Another one that I've kind of noticed, is just a little tip. If you're inviting people, dinner is a much better invitation than lunch, or if you're doing breakfast, it's really going to be around lunchtime. I don't know if this is a generalization, but it's been my experience that they're more social and more open during dinner or later times. And I know that that's very different from mainline American culture. So be open to spend time mostly in the evening. But a big one and a big tip is, I think the biggest lesson I've learned over the years has been that, in America, they say time is money. I would say in a lot of other cultures, time is love. And so really, when you plan to host someone, it has to be a long period of time. It can't be a rushed environment. And that's very important, because I remember the first few times I was hosted, in my mind, after living in the US for so long, the average time that you go to someone's house is maybe 2.5 hours. And I was trying to be respectful at the 2.5 hour mark and saying, okay, maybe I should go. And the response was like, why are you leaving? We haven't even this and that. And then I started learning that no, like whenever I've been hosting, I need to be willing to be there for a really long time. And the more you're willing to do that, the better, the more hospitable that you are, the better, a better guest that you are, and the more opportunities to share life, to share Jesus, and to be light.
Yeah. And I'm connecting some of these things with our American traditional holidays. I'm thinking about Thanksgiving and Christmas. Yes, they are past, but they will come back again, come around again. Do you think that's a particularly good time of year to express hospitality, or are there better ways to open our homes or let our Muslims neighbor know they are welcomed and valued neighbor? What are your suggestions for someone who wants to start entertaining or hosting Muslims?
Absolutely. So yes, Thanksgiving, Christmas, Easter, Valentine's Day, even, or a lot of the holidays are very just an easy and natural way to share culture. And so on a practical level, it's going to be there just out of curiosity, if they haven't experienced a Thanksgiving or a Christmas in someone, just out of curiosity, they might say, hey, yeah, why not? Also, in the same way that they're willing and open to sharing Ramadan meals with you, they want it they kind of creates that expectation. A lot of times these are transactional cultures in when it comes to hosting. It is a lot about I host you, you host me. And sometimes there's even a little bit of like, well, it was my turn last time, so now it's your turn, and so I'm waiting on you to invite me. And so when it comes to holidays, it's similar. For those of my friends who have invited me for Ramadan, they hinted even at me at saying, oh, what are you doing for Thanksgiving? Will you be in town? And I had one friend who invited herself very much directly, because they are curious and interested in learning about the culture and about you as their friend. So these are excellent opportunities to share. And even if we're leaving town or something for the holidays, during the Christmas season, for example, since it's a little bit longer, we make sure that we have several days blocked to host people in our home. And it's a wonderful opportunity to share the Christmas story and to share about Emmanuel, God with us, and why that's important to us and leading to what Jesus has done for us. And so we have several families that we don't see as often because of busyness and whatnot, but we always get an invitation during Ramadan. They always get an invitation from us, either Thanksgiving or Christmas. So this is an excellent opportunity. Holidays are wonderful opportunities to share that, again, because they're curious, because they want to know, and they want to learn about you. And the more you share about who you are, the more comfortable they feel, the more valued they feel, and the more willing they are to engage in spiritual conversations.
So as we close out this episode today, is there anything else you would like to add?
I think for those who are interested in hosting, I know that at times that may seem intimidating and that may seem a little out of our comfort zone, at least culturally speaking, but there is no better way to really show who you are, to really get to know someone, than to ask them to step into your home. Also, in your home is where you are where you are able to represent Jesus the best. So I would just give a word of challenge that if the Lord is already prompting your heart to do that, just take that step of faith and invite the first person. And there's so much that you learn as long as you go. The Lord wants our yes, and if we put our willingness before him, he's the one that leads, he's the one that gives us the words to say, and he's the one that really works through us.
Yeah. Rebecca, if listeners want to get in touch with you, how can they do so?
Well, I think the best way would be to contact Heart for Muslims, and then they can pass the information along to me. I would love to be in contact with you to help in any way that I can as you step out and host people.
That's excellent. So here what we're gonna do now. We had a beautiful, wonderful conversation. Some of these topics tend to be heavy topics. I would like to close. I always ask my guests to do this. So I would like to close this podcast, this episode, with a joke. So tell us a joke.
Okay, well, I'm gonna give you a hospitality joke, okay?
Okay.
This joke is from my father. I will paraphrase by saying that. And this is, I think in Latin America, you have the art of repeating the same jokes over and over again, and somehow they're still funny. So hopefully this will be well received. But he always tells a story when we're about to eat and about to start praying, that there was one time this man who was in the jungle in Latin America, and all of a sudden he's just taking a hike and enjoying himself when he comes across a lion in the jungle, and he didn't have any weapons, he didn't have any way to defend himself, so he immediately dropped to his knees, and he is asking and begging, God, please help me. You say you protect your children, so please answer, and you answer the prayers, so please answer my prayer and help me. To his surprise, when he opens his eyes, he finds the lion also kneeling over and praying, Lord Jesus, thank you for this food I'm about to eat. In Jesus' name, amen. So I don't know whose prayer was answered that day, but you take a guess.
Good. That's good. Thank you so much for being on the show. Again, that was Rebecca Castillo. And thank you to all our listeners. We truly could not do this without you. If you learned something, have a topic suggestion, or would like to leave us feedback, drop us a note at oururbanvoices.com. Be sure to subscribe to the show and leave an honest review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Tune in next week for more honest discussion from diverse voices.
You've been listening to Our Urban Voices with Dr. Alphonse Javed, which presents Christian narratives through diverse voices that impact urban ministry. Please check back for new episodes every week.